Amy, this is our last episode for this season. And thinking back over 3 years that we've done this podcast now, I know two of my favorite episodes and two of the episodes that people have talked about a lot are the ones we've done on brain health. In fact, in the last, 2 weeks, I guess, I've seen that two of our guests, Dr. Jennifer Butte and Dr. Andrew Budson, were both featured on the largest podcast having to do with Alzheimer's. So we're getting some fantastic folks sharing with us too.
Absolutely.
But tonight we want to talk about a little twist on brain health. Did you know that new research has shown that gratitude has long-lasting positive effects toward improving mental health?
Well, Holland, I am so grateful that you shared that. And I hope that helps my brain. Actually, I have personally benefited from the practice of gratitude and have seen how this habit has helped my outlook on life.
Well, we are very grateful that Janice Kaplan has agreed to join us at the Afterword table as we talk about gratitude. Janice is an award-winning author and the former editor-in-chief for Parade magazine.
We are so excited to have Janice. And in addition, we are thrilled to have Beth Sammons, author, speaker, content writer for multiple platforms. Welcome to you both.
Hi, I'm Holland Webb.
Hi, I'm Amy Boland.
And you're listening to The Afterword, a conversation about the future of words.
And since you both have fascinating personal stories, would you mind taking just about 60 seconds each and sharing the Cliff Notes version of your life and who you are? Janice, can we start with you?
Oh, sure. The Cliff Notes version. Okay. Well, I'm a journalist, a TV producer, the author of a whole bunch of popular books and novels, including the New York Times bestseller, The Gratitude Diaries, which is relevant to today's conversation. As you said, I was the editor-in-chief of Parade magazine, which at the time was the largest magazine in America. And that was kind of a great job. I think for me, being a novelist as well as a journalist has always made me think about people's stories and about what affects us, what makes us happy, what control we have over our own lives. And since I love researching topics that intrigue me, it's really been such a pleasure for me to write about gratitude, to have written the Gratitude Diaries, to have taken what I learned and use it to inspire others. Did I hit 60 seconds there?
I think so. I'm excited now about this conversation. I'm really excited to learn more from you. Mary Beth, would you mind giving us the Cliff Notes bio?
Sure. I'm a former journalist and a book author of several books too, and two on gratitude, one, The Grateful Life, and one, Living Life as a Thank You. And I was a newspaper reporter who wrote for some magazines and always gravitated towards stories of ordinary people who were doing extraordinary things, especially in the face of adversity. And so during a time when I was caregiving for both of my parents who were reaching the end of their life, my journalism career was reaching the end of its life, or the Tribune where I was working for in the features department. Some of those departments were closing. So I decided to follow what I was seeing with these people who were always talking about grit and gratitude. And I started writing for nonprofits in the development departments, finding, stories of children at risk and writing their stories so that donors would be moved into action. And then also writing for healthcare to try to translate, what was going on. And so you could have a better patient journey. But the words that I kept hearing over and over were from, people who were homeless, people who were fighting serious illness, was how grateful they were and the blessings and the silver linings they found. So that's what led me to research and write these books.
Oh, you touched on so many interests and commonalities. I'm helping my mother, who's coming to the end of her life as well, and going through all the challenges of dealing with challenges and wonderful things that have happened with the healthcare system that's here near us. And we just did an episode on philanthropy, and I had worked several years writing for development departments. So it's exciting to hear someone else talk about the same things. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Well, this is the perfect topic to close out the year 2021. And as we close out, because we do love words, let's get a little clarity. So Janice and Mary Beth, what we're going to do is a quick rapid fire definition round for some words, because again, at least what I've learned is that I don't really know some of the context or the background for some of the words in the topics that we're talking about. So the first one, it doesn't matter who takes it first, Janice or Mary Beth. Thankfulness. What is thankfulness?
I'll take that. Thankfulness is being grateful for the things and the people in your life that are providing goodness and recognizing them and saying thank you.
Okay, excellent. Janice?
Recognizing what's around you and being able to appreciate it.
Excellent. Very good. Okay, that helps. So is there a difference now then for this word, gratitude?
I think gratitude has a deeper resonance. People often talk about gratitude and happiness. And I think that the distinction there, and perhaps the distinction with thankfulness also, is that gratitude has to be something that you feel quite intrinsically and that's quite deep and that has a resonance that continues throughout your life and has those broader rings that it develops. So happiness, I think, can be very fleeting and can be something that disappears. You can be very happy when you are eating an ice cream cone. You're probably not going to be grateful for an ice cream cone. You can, appreciate something, appreciate the beauty of something. But if you're truly grateful for it, that doesn't go away as quickly. And that is much longer lasting.
I like that. Mary Beth, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that summarizes it really well.
Okay. Broader rings. That makes me think of trees. How about the word appreciation? You mentioned it just a minute ago, Janice.
Yeah, I think appreciation is really a question of almost time, of being able to stop and to take in the fullness of something and to take in the measure of something. If you're driving by a beautiful tree or a lovely sunset, you don't appreciate it unless you take the moment to stop and see it. So I think appreciation requires that investment of time, however small, even momentary, but an actual looking and an actual seeing and an actual taking in.
Very good. How about you, Mary Beth?
I agree. I think that appreciation is all about stopping and recognizing the source of and where the goodness is coming from and possibly outside yourself, but it is all about taking the time to see it.
All right. How about this one? Resilience. And I'm adding this word with this topic of gratitude, I think for a good reason. Mary Beth, you kind of touched a little bit about that in some of your work.
Well, sure. I think resilience and grit, are forging ahead despite in difficult times and finding some of the silver linings. I think obviously we've come through the last year and a half, and that is something. But I interviewed nurses throughout the last year and a half on the front lines of COVID, and instead, all of them tried to focus. Obviously, it was very hard, but all of them, especially in the beginning, were focusing on the positivity that they saw, like the people in the cities who were rallying and playing music for them and clapping when they went to work or bringing food. And still today, even though they're pretty worn down, many of them will mention a greater appreciation they have when they come home and they can hug their kids. So, I think it's taught us some lessons in this very hard time that we're grateful for, but you have to really look for that side of it.
Excellent. How about you, Janice?
I think that's lovely and beautifully said. Resilience comes from seeing the flip side of the bad stuff, right? Bad stuff happens in all of our lives, and bad situations, certainly we've all been aware of them in the last year or two. But in any life, there are moments, there are events that aren't happy. And the resilience comes from saying, okay, I see that, but there's got to be another side to that. There's got to be something else. And taking that moment to get the perspective, to flip it over, as Mary Beth said, to hear the people who are literally clapping for you, or maybe just the proverbial background applause that you can hear yourself, and saying, I don't have much choice except to go forward now. And how do I do that? And what can I find that's going to help me do that?
Excellent. Thank you all so much. All right. So we're going to end with a word that I think many of us may understand, but I think gratitude, this topic of gratitude is going to help us unpack a little bit more. Toxic emotions.
When we were researching, I co-wrote both of the books. And when we were researching it, we interviewed an expert at the University of California, Davis, and he said that gratitude's like an exercise. You have to keep using it. But he says that our brains are hardwired for negativity, for noticing the gaps and omissions, the bad things. And so when you express anger, you produce more anger. But when you express gratitude, you become more grateful. So the toxic emotions, he's saying, are right at the tip of our lives. And gratitude is something we can use as a tool to move and focus elsewhere.
So good. How about you, Janice?
No, that's lovely. And to continue on that, the idea of being wired for negativity. Somebody once explained it to me that our ancestors, when they were out in the fields collecting berries, it didn't help them to know which were the 10 tasty berries, but they better know which was the one poisonous berry. Otherwise, they did not become our ancestors. So we're all the descendants of people who were very good at knowing which is the poisonous berry. And that is what I guess has now turned into, since most of us aren't picking berries anymore, we're buying them at the grocery store, that has now turned into our focusing on those negative things and what you're describing as toxic emotions. And as Mary Beth said, I think that the advantage and the purpose in many ways of gratitude is being able to start looking for the good berries and to be able to say, maybe there is one toxic, dangerous berry out there, but there are 9 other really good berries, and I'm going to think about those too.
So good. Now I'm getting hungry. All right. Thank you all so much. This was excellent, helping us just decipher a little bit and feel like we can move into this conversation well. Thank you.
Let's dive a little deeper into your stories. How did the book come to be, and what are some of the insights that you gained in the process of writing it, Janice?
Well, after I left as editor of Parade, a big foundation that liked my work came to me and asked me to do a project with them. And I knew they were doing some research into gratitude, and that intrigued me. So I started out as almost a little bit of a lark. And I offered to do, or they suggested that I do a national survey on gratitude. So that sounded like a fun idea. Having been at Parade, I was used to trying to have my pulse on what America thinks. But the results of that national survey started coming in, and they were really fascinating. Something like 90 or 95% of people said that they thought grateful people were happier. And when we asked if they were grateful for family and friends, again, 90 or 95% of people said, absolutely, grateful for family and friends. And then we asked them, do you express gratitude? And all of a sudden, the number plunged. And only about half the people in that survey said that they expressed gratitude. So it struck me that we have what I started to call a gratitude gap, that we know there's something that's going to make us happier, but we simply don't do it. And, because I'm a journalist and had been at Parade, I got to go on all sorts of TV shows and sound smart and talk about the gratitude gap in this big survey. But at some point, it struck me that I was as guilty of it as anybody else. And I talk about in the book being at a New Year's Eve party and trying to figure out what was going to make me happier in the year that was coming up. And it wasn't that I was not happy. I'd had a perfectly nice year, but I thought, what's going to happen this year so that next year I just feel like, dancing on the streets and putting on a funny hat on New Year's Eve. And I realized then that some of the research I had been doing for that foundation and for that survey, I realized then the classic case that it's not the events that happen in our lives, but it's our attitude towards them. And so that was the time that I decided to challenge myself and see what would happen if I did spend a year living more gratefully. And, as I said, it started out being just a bit of a lark, of a literary device. And what truly astonished me in the course of that year was just how dramatic it was, how powerful the simple act of changing my perspective could be. Nothing really special happened in that year in terms of events, but I have to tell you that it ended up being one of the most satisfying years I've ever had. And it was simply by changing my attitude, thinking positively, thinking gratefully, getting to spend all my time doing that, because it was what my research and writing was about. And so that certainly had a huge impact on my life during that year. And it has lingered for the several years since the book came out.
A year of gratitude, a year of thinking thankfully. Is that how you said it?
It was how a year living more gratefully, yes, changed my life, was the subtitle.
Wow. Mary Beth, your book, how did that develop? And then what are some of the insights you gained from your writing?
I have a co-author in San Francisco, and we had just written a book about courage. And coming off of that, and as I mentioned before, I was taking care of both of my parents simultaneously and pretty much living in a hospital, and had just transitioned my career to be, writing. And I just try to pay attention to where I am. And I was just astonished. I was working for some students in the Austin neighborhood on the west side of Chicago, and horrible circumstances. I mean, they walk out of, it's a college prep school, and they walk out of school and get beaten up, and they don't have fathers, and they just all these horrible things. But when my job was to interview the students and to tell their stories, to move donors into action or to get media and support. And every student that I talked to, they would talk about the things that they were so grateful for. And it might be something like, somebody gave me a book and I'm bringing it home. Or I worked in another neighborhood that's mostly Latino, and the students would talk about how they're so inspired because when they get home from school, they see their dad, who's spent a day as a landscaper out, working hard, and that motivates them to move ahead, and how grateful they are. And, I'm thinking teenagers who are grateful for their parents, that's something, So my co-author and I decided to start practicing gratitude ourselves. And I started looking around, the hospital and looking for the gifts. And one of the nurses on the ICU ward was a male, and my son was a teenager at the time too. And he was very good with my son. And my son ended up being inspired by him and becoming a paramedic. And the doctors just were so kind and caring to my parents. So there were so many gifts that came from that, what would seemingly be a dark experience. And so I wanted to, interview others. And so we interviewed people all over the country and in different countries to write their similar story, their experiences.
Thank you for sharing that.
Holland, I'm listening to these experts, Mary Beth and Janice, and I know for me personally, I think I would definitely have to fall into the, hardwired for negativity camp and be one of those 50% who are not expressing gratitude for sure. And then I ran into an app that came with a book by Ann Voskamp called The 1,000 Gifts. And you took photos on your phone of things, and you made a kind of a catalog of things that you were grateful for. And the challenge was to get to 1,000. And I took that so seriously. And what happened afterwards was transformative. It's very similar to what Janice and Mary Beth were saying, is when I finished that practice of gratitude truly became part of who I was. But I needed to cultivate and strengthen having that attitude of gratitude, if you will. And so I'm going to start, first of all, with you, Mary Beth. What are some tools that you have used, and how could those help change one's outlook over time in developing gratitude?
one of the first ones, when I first started researching this, and I'm sure Janice, probably everybody talks about a gratitude journal. And so I took that seriously, being a writer. So I, put a journal at the side of my bed and made it a point that every night, before I went to sleep, I would write down things that happened during the day that I was grateful for. And I started, even on really crummy days, I started seeing the gifts that were born of that. So I do that. It's been years and I still do that. And I start every day before I get my head off the pillow. I try to think of what the blessings that might come in the day ahead, like things that are on my agenda for the day, and how I can look at them with a sense of gratitude. But one thing I had read about, somebody called a savoring walk. And it's the idea of going out into nature and walking, and then looking at all the things along the way that you could be grateful for, and also thinking of your own things you're grateful for. But I found that while my parents were sick, I could get up very early in the morning before I made it to the hospital and do these savoring walks and really focus on gratitude and having time to pause, it's self-care, and being thankful for what I saw.
That is so good. How about you, Janice? What tools can you give us?
Well, I love the ideas that both of you have raised. Mary Beth's walk is lovely, and your idea of taking photographs. I think the key thing to say is that gratitude should never be a chore. It should never be something like that you feel like you have to do. And I think for a lot of people, and I'm sure Mary Beth has heard this too, when you mentioned gratitude journals, I'm sure you hear a lot of people who say, oh, I started a gratitude journal, but I guess I stopped. And it's because having that starts to seem like something that they have to do every night. And, we're all busy. We have long days. Who wants to go home and have to write an essay at night? So one small thing that I often suggest to people is to tell yourself that for the next week, you're just going to put a scrap of paper next to your bed, and you're going to write down one thing that made you grateful that day. Just a couple of words, not a whole essay, just one thing that made you grateful. So how does that work? Well, you're going to wake up tomorrow morning and you're going to have your first cup of coffee and you're going to say, gosh, that was good coffee. Oh, grateful for coffee. Done for the day. That's what I'm going to write down tonight is coffee. And that's okay, because it has started you off with something positive. It's given you something positive to start your day, and that's going to resonate throughout the day, and that you're going to write down again that night. Or it's going to get to be 5 o'clock in the afternoon and you haven't been grateful for anything, and you suddenly remember that silly piece of paper that you were asked to keep next to your bed for a week. And what can you possibly put on it because you've had such a miserable day? And so once again, you're going to stop and you're going to look around and you're going to find something. You're going to say, well, there's a pretty flower blossoming outside my window, or there's a nice friend who was kind to me today. You'll find something. And I think that does two things. Once again, it gives you that moment of positivity, that moment that you're going to put down on your piece of paper that night. But it also teaches you the key lesson, which is perspective. Because I think what you learn in that walk, or what you learned by taking 1,000 photographs, and I'm really impressed if you managed to do that, is that it's all about perspective, and that it's all about how do I look at this from a slightly different angle, and recognizing that you can do that. And that gives you an incredible power to realize later on that whatever occurs, you can, and I sometimes do this, I sometimes physically make myself stop if I'm frustrated or irritable. And I think, okay, turn it around. What about this situation can make me happy instead? And that is what I think is as you said, the practice of gratitude.
These are so good. I am writing everything down, Holland.
Let's turn from our personal stories and look a little bit at some research. One research study examined the impact of how people in management who express regular gratitude toward employees influence positive production. The findings indicated that employees who received thanks and appreciation produced 50% more than employees who did not hear those words of gratitude. How do you think we can prepare people in management, whether that's the CEO in a boardroom or the teacher in the classroom, to show gratitude?
Well, this is Janice. You're absolutely right that the research on that and the research on gratitude in the workplace is enormous. And in that survey that I mentioned before, we also looked at the workplace, and Holland, sadly, we found that the place where people are least likely to express gratitude is at work. It was something like only 9% of people said they expressed gratitude at work. And you mentioned how to get management and bosses and other executives to express gratitude. And I think there are a couple of things going on. I think, first of all, is that sometimes people think that gratitude makes them seem soft. And hopefully the kind of research that you're suggesting or that you're mentioning and that others have done will start to get out and change that and make them realize that gratitude makes them much more powerful. In a survey that we did, we found out that 81% of people said that they would work harder for a grateful boss, and 90% said that they thought a grateful boss was more likely to be successful, because nobody succeeds on their own. And when you're grateful to the people who work for you, when you're grateful to your colleagues, they want to help you. They want to do other things for you. And I suspect Mary Beth has seen this also. I am finding more and more companies that are recognizing that. I gave a talk once at Google, and they showed me their wall of gratitude. This being Google, it was, of course, a virtual wall of gratitude, but it was a place where employees could thank somebody else or could recognize what somebody had done or send somebody a cup of coffee or a snack or, as a token of thanks for what they had done. And I think the more and more companies that start doing that start spreading that word, the more powerful the message becomes.
That's been my experience as well, that in the last few years, and I would attribute some of this to LinkedIn, there's just been kind of a push for companies and for management and new managers to be trained in how to show appreciation and gratitude to team members in a way that inspires people to be productive, not just a sort of offhand thank you, but either consistent enough or repetitious enough or deep enough gratitude that it really has meaning for people. What do you think, Mary Beth?
I agree. I think Janice said it very well, and her studies really show it. I'm mentioning that I've been doing a lot in the nursing field this year, and I stumbled on an organization, Common Spirit Health, and they are setting up gratitude because it's such a difficult year, gratitude toolkits and programs in different hospitals across the country. So to honor the nurses, so people can write a note about their nurse on the tree, or a nurse can write about what they were grateful at their job. And they leave prompts on Post-it notes. They say, today I'm grateful for. But I think in hard times, especially in the, the healthcare professions right now, showing up at work and, doing the hard work that it takes, somebody better be saying thank you to them, and I think that those thank yous mean more now than ever. One of the nonprofits I work for, the president, he is a real big believer on personal thank you notes, and he doesn't send them out for no reason, but the impact that has when somebody, I've heard employees go, he just sent me a thank you note for, running the fundraiser, and it means so much. We don't get, and these are not email thank you notes. These are personal mailed thank you notes. So I think there's a lot of value going back to appreciating people and showing them how grateful you are. One tact I took when I got into this graduate school program, I had really tried hard to get into it. And it was in the middle of COVID, and I'm stuck in my dining room writing. And I decided to just send a thank you note to all the people I have worked for, all the editors and people who have been very supportive of my work, and just say thank you. I'm not a young, 20 something anymore. And I just wanted to say thank you for what they had led me towards. So that was kind of a different spin on it.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I just love both of you sharing this. And it kind of goes back to our definition of the word appreciation. And it takes time. Both you, Mary Beth, and Janice, you're talking about things that take time. And that is, it's not an unlimited commodity, but it's a valuable commodity. And I think that place of gratitude is, and saying thank you is key. Thank you so much. This was good. All right. So we're going to close out episode 1 because we have a lot more to talk about. And Janice, I'm going to start with you. What is an essential element we need to know to understand the stories and the purpose behind gratitude?
I think possibly the most important thing to many people is surprisingly about gratitude is how much control it gives you. We all want to feel like we have some control over our lives, and so much of our lives has felt out of control given recent circumstances. But I think people who start being involved in the world of gratitude start to understand what we said before, that very basic idea that you can't change the events in your life, but you can change how you think about them. And Mary Beth has talked about some of the difficulties she has dealt with and she has seen other people deal with. When I was writing the gratitude diaries, I was in the fortunate position of using gratitude to have my life go from good to better. But as I've traveled the country and talked to people about my book and given so many talks, I've met endless people who have used gratitude to get through the worst tragedies of life. The death of a child, of a spouse, of going through their own personal chronic illnesses. And those are terrible events in any life. And in no way am I suggesting that they're not. But again, when they happen, the only control you have is to decide how you're going to go on. And when you give yourself that gift of gratitude, you give yourself that gift to say, okay, I can go on. And I can't control what happened before, but I can control this sense of I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to feel better, and I'm going to make myself and others around me feel better, because what choice do I have except to wake up tomorrow morning and get out of bed and take the next step forward? And so I know that's kind of a dramatic way of saying it, but I think gratitude really does give you that bit of control and sense that my life can be my own, and I can make it more the way I want than I had realized.
That's beautiful. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. How about you, Mary Beth?
That's beautiful. It is beautiful. In our research, and Janice probably did too, but there's a, Brother David Stendhal Rast. He's a Benedictine monk who runs the Network for Grateful Living. And I'm just going to read what he wrote because it's just a short quote, but he says, gratefulness and gratitude are the full response to a given moment and all it contains. It's a universal practice that fosters personal transformation, cross-cultural understanding, interfaith dialogue, intergenerational respect, nonviolent conflict resolution, and ecological sustainability. So I think there's more, in the world we live in today with all the social unrest, there is a place for gratitude there in some of the healing.
Can I just add a line? Yes, I agree. David Stendhal Rast is a wonderful, wonderful inspiration. And my favorite line of his is a very short one, which is when he says, it's not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratitude that makes us happy.
Oh.
And,
yes.
And often we think of it the other way around. We think, I'll be grateful when I have a reason to be grateful. But he points out it's not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratitude that makes us happy. And I think that's a wonderful way to think of it.
That's beautiful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Perfect line to end on, right?
Absolutely.
Special thanks to Mary Beth and Janice. This is a wonderful conversation. While you wait for part 2, please go to theafterwordpodcast.com and become a subscriber. You can also leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts and tell your friends about us. And as always, you are welcome at our table. We are grateful for you.